Thank you. Now, I don't know what Peter has been saying about me, but I am not responsible for the noises you heard back there. And neither is he. Now, I've traveled here from Norway, from Oslo, and of course you can't travel without a friend. So this is my friend Sniff, and I will tell you a little bit more about him later with the help of Peter. So in the meantime, Sniff, you sit here. And what I hope to give you today is a little inspiration, some insights that we have developed in my program. I run a program in the Research Council in Norway called ICT, Information and Communication Technologies for people with a disability. Well, at least that's how it started. Now, in the course of the 12 years that we have had this program, we have discovered a lot of very exciting and interesting secrets, and that's why I've called my presentation The Hidden Gems. Now, the hidden gems are two, and when most of you talk about innovation, and the literature on innovation is concerned with creativity and user-centered innovation. That's the talk of the town these days, user-centered innovation. But when you look at what kind of users people are looking for, they're generally not looking far enough. They're just looking at themselves, and maybe the colleague. And that is the first hidden gem, looking for the user who is not like you, and who wants the same as you do, but cannot get there in the same way. And there's a nice way of putting this that a young man told us at this conference that you can see here, Innovation for All conference in earlier this year. He was in a design challenge as a user representative, and he was in a wheelchair. And after a while he said, "I'm so tired of being talked about as disabled. We are not disabled, we are just differently abled." And it's a small change of wording, but it's actually a quite important change of approach. It's a bit like when you're driving. If you're afraid of ending up in the ditch, you look in the ditch and you'll end up in the ditch. Okay, so keep your eyes on the road. And when you say that someone is differently abled, that focuses on the abilities they have, instead of concentrating on the abilities that they don't have. Because we've all got lots of abilities, we don't all use them, and we cannot use them all of the time. So if you focus on the difference in ability, you get the positive side of things. And the first gem, people with special needs, is the main and important source of radical innovations. Now, most innovations, user-centered innovations, where you take yourself or your neighbor as the inspiration, are incremental innovations. If you ask somebody to write with a feather pen, like the man here, and you say, well, I'm going to take the user seriously. I'll ask you, how do you want to improve this writing instrument? He would say, well, I would like a pen that the tip doesn't break so easily, maybe ink that doesn't drip. It's really a mess with this ink business. So you invent the fountain pen. Okay, so you go on, more demanding users. You get to the ballpoint pen. Okay, you get to the rollerball pen. You stay in the pen trajectory. The most radical innovation in this trajectory is a pen for left-handed people. But if you want to get out of the pen trajectory, you have to get your inspiration from somewhere else. And that is for people who cannot use their hand, who cannot write because they cannot see what happens when the pen touches the paper. Okay, who's that? Blind people. So this is the radical innovation that some of you may be using. This is created as an aid for the blind. If it had been up to you, those of you who can write with your hand, we would be in the pen business. And the reason, of course, is that when you automate, when you make a keyboard, you can learn to type and you can write without looking. You don't have to see. Of course, that requires that the keys don't interlock either, and that was another feature why we have this keyboard we do. But the main idea is that it is something you can learn without seeing. And actually, when you learn to type, you learn to type as a blind. Now, the reason why I have this one is that one of the first inventors of the typewriter was an Italian. And his main motivation was that he had a fiancée who was blind, and he didn't get any love letters. So he had to invent the typewriter to get the love letters he wanted. So that's a good motivation. So I hope he got lots of love letters after that. And as I said, touch typing, some of you may have taken a class in touch typing. What you have been doing is that you have been learning to write as a blind person, because you were told not to look at the keyboard, to look at the manuscript or somewhere else. And for the time being, where is the somewhere else that we are looking at when we are trying to use the keyboard? We are driving and trying to use the mobile phone. Okay? Then we are in the same situation. We may not be blind, but our eyes should be blind relative to the mobile phone. We should be looking at the road, hopefully. And another of these small inventions that some of you may be using is precisely the telephone, invented by Alexander Graham Bell for the hard of hearing. He was a teacher in the school for the deaf. And along the same lines of incremental innovation, a better solution for those who cannot hear is not that the teacher shouts louder. That doesn't do much for the students, or it definitely doesn't do much for the teacher. So this is another example of a radical innovation intended, and this again in the patent application, intended to be for the specific use of deaf people. Somehow it made it to the rest of us. And the phonograph, the record player by Thomas Alva Edison, just an instrument so that blind people can read books without, and this is important, without the help of another person. Because a lot of the motivation for people with a disability is that they want to be independent. They want to do things on their own, and basically they want to do the same things as everybody else and with everybody else, and not have to rely on somebody to push them around, to write the letter for them, to read the book for them. So the record player and the tape and all the books that you can get now on or download it to get when you're driving. They were just under the BBC the other day announcing the 75-year anniversary for the audio book, introduced in the UK as a device for a service for war veterans of the First World War, so that they could get the books they wanted without having to have the whole family take turns reading to them. And I just want to show you one of the projects that we are supporting in this very exciting field of radical innovations. The man to the left on the picture there by the computer, he's a dentist. And he's a computer enthusiast. So he wanted to use his computer while he was working. Now there's one problem if you're a dentist, that your hands are busy in someone else's mouth. So how do you operate the computer? Well, you can always hire somebody to stand next to you and click and show you the next X-ray of whatever tooth you want to look at. But that's a very cumbersome and very expensive solution. So this guy said, well, it has to be a better way. And like many of the challenges with ICT, it's the interface. That's the problem. You understand what's there, but getting the thing to work for you, the interface is the challenge. So, of course, being a dentist, he was looking for the solutions where dentists normally operate, in the mouth. And what did he find? He found the tongue, okay, as the instrument to click with. And then he needed a mouse mat, and that's the inside of your cheek. So what they are doing now is he came to us to get a project on finding the best technology. And actually, as you can see, it looks, the man to the lower right there, the solution that they're working on now is very much the same as this microphone. It only doesn't transmit sounds. It picks up a movement of your tongue to the inside of your cheek, and you can not just turn the page, you can open the door, you can do just about anything. And then, of course, I discovered, well, who else is in that same situation? People with a broken neck are in that situation. Surgeons who are doing peephole surgery, the same situation. Pilots, drivers, lots of people. And when you consider that group of people, you'll see that that's a pattern that we see quite often, that the most demanding users are at the two extremes of those who are, to use the terms previous today, those who are born that way, or those who have become that way. And, or become that way because of the situation, like the pilot or the surgeon. Now, the interesting thing when we move to the market side is that then you combine the needs and requirements of the high-paying segment with the low-paying or no-paying segment, but it's actually the same functionality that they're after. So this is an image of how this oral mouse works, which is now quite a large European project. And they keep discovering more and more situations and more people who would like to operate any kind of machinery or service that way, because it leaves their hands free, or it replaces the hands they don't have, or do not respond to them. So, back to SNIF. Now, SNIF is the result of a project. How many of you are working in industrial design, product design? Some hands. Oh, quite a few. We support, or we give out prizes for creative, inclusive design, and then, of course, using this trick of saying, go for your most demanding clients. And of course, your most demanding clients are those who would like to use your product, but cannot because of the way it is organized or shaped, or the interface today. And people with some sort of disability are a bit like the canary in the mine. They hit the wall first. So if you go for their requirements, you pick up on a lot of others. So at the School of Architecture and Design in Oslo, they had a big project on RFID, radio frequency identifying system. It's a wireless technology. and it was used to tag and locate different things on board on an oil platform. An oil platform is not where you want to have garbage or things lying around. So that was the high-paying market. And then they said, well, there has to be more applications for this technology. Let's challenge the students and say, can you find ways of using this technology for children with disabilities? So here comes Sniff, because he is actually a high-tech dog. He may not look it, and that's part of the point, that he's very cuddly, and since this is the third prototype, he is now also able to survive kids jumping on him and throwing him around, which is always a concern when you make things for children. And he has an RFID system in his snout that he can recognize things he gets in contact with. Now, if he hasn't become too scared, we'll see. You hear him? Huh? And that's I'm scared sound. And he vibrates, and he can play music. Yeah, sorry, that's okay. And the point of this is that when you use this as a toy, it vibrates and it reacts to sound. Now, what sense is not vital for using this toy to play with other children? Sight. Okay, most children's games rely on visual ability. And what kids want to do is to play with other kids. Okay? So if you can't see, you're often sent off to play on your own. And if you have any particular toys adapted to you at all, because the scourge of disabled children is that most of the things we give them are educational. They're not fun. So with Sniff, you can play with other children because he relies on your other senses and not your visual abilities. And that means that he's just as interesting for all children, because kids don't notice that there's no advantage to be able to see. They just think he's a nice dog and it's a challenging game. So this is an example of inclusive design. Now, what I call the hidden gem number 2 is not the radical innovation, but what we call innovation for all. Because, like I said, this canary in the mine business often means that the canary tells you something that the miners would like to know. And this is when the miners like to know, maybe that's a bigger market. And that's what this figure shows, that it's the overlap between sort of the social interest and the commercial interest is the area for innovation for all. Because if you take that approach that I cited to begin with, the differently abled, and you say that it doesn't matter whether you're born that way, you become that way, or you are that way just now, it's a big market. And for the market, it doesn't matter whether you require an alternative interface just now or tomorrow or all the time. The market is just now. And if you look at the market of those who are differently abled at any given point in time, they may be some of these. Everybody is 5 years old once. Some twice, some always. And you can go through the list and you can recognize yourself maybe in a couple of these cannot remember code and password. Ever happened to anybody here? You stand there and say, what was that again? And from a market perspective, that is the interesting approach. And when you want to work with inclusive design and innovating with people, you need some methodology. So this is a book that we worked with the Design Council in Norway and the Royal College of Art in London to produce this book of how-to, because as it says here, once you sell people on the idea of innovation for all, they say, okay, good idea. Where do I find this Mr. All? You know, who's the user to talk to? Well, this will give you an idea of who you can talk to, because universal design or inclusive design does not mean one size fits all. It means diversity. It means choice, alternative. I want my phone to vibrate when I'm in a situation where it's not suitable that it makes noise. And that is also an advantage for those who are hard of hearing. So if you go through this list, if you test your solution on this diversity and you incorporate as much as you can of that, you really have a service or a product that is designed for all. You won't get all the way. You can use the traditional 80-20. You can get to 80. Most solutions today get to 50. Okay? So the increase in market from 50 to 80% of the population, it's a lucrative business. So my conclusion, I've just quoted from some of the big shots, that creating a product that is understandable and usable by older people. You're too young, but you will get to, more glasses and the light. You need stronger light and that kind of extra service. When you do that, you have a product that is understandable and usable, full stop. And an American research firm made the assessment that at least 60% of the population will benefit from accessible technology when asked. If you ask people if they consider themselves to have a problem at any given time, daily problem, 30% of people will say yes. But the estimate here is 60, and my bet is 80. Or would you rather be without the typewriter, the keyboard, without the telephone, without the record player, and so on? Well, you would be there if it hadn't been for those differently abled people. Thank you for your attention.